So this is one where I'm giving you the congruence statement, and then you're going to complete which parts are congruent to each other. So what I would do is I would take, again, some colored pencils or maybe highlighters and say, okay, A and G, they're both in the first spot of my two triangle statements, so they must be congruent and go together. So then in my picture, I'll underline A and G. Okay. That L and I are both second, so I'm going to underline L and I in the next color, so I know that they go together. And then in pink, I'll do X and W, so they go together. So what that allows us to do is to fill in some missing information. If X is 92 degrees, that means angle W is also 92 degrees. If angle G is 55 degrees, that means angle A is also 55 degrees. And if the distance from L to X is 4 centimeters, that means the distance from I to W is also 4 centimeters. So if we go and look at our questions, Lx is congruent to what? Okay, so Lx goes from the blue to the pink, so that means I must go from the blue to the pink in my second segment statement. So I got to go I, W. Angle A is congruent to angle G. I have them both underlined in red. IW, there's no segment bar over it, so that means I'm asking you for the length. Okay, so IW is 4 centimeters. D says triangle LAX is congruent to triangle. Well, LAX goes from the one I underlined in blue to red, because that's A, and then to pink. So I have to go in the same order. So I'll start with I, and then go to red, so G, and end with the pink, W. Now angle I, we don't know what that is yet because there's nothing here, nothing up here. However, we know the other two angles in the triangle, so we can calculate that angle. Let's say 180 minus 92 minus 55. So if I do that in my calculator, I'm going to get 33. So angle I must be 33 degrees. Measure of angle A we wrote down was 55 degrees. And now the measure of angle L. Well, in my picture, I have them both underlined in blue, I and L, so they must have the same measure of 33 degrees. So I really think color coding things at the beginning is going to be super helpful for you. All right, let's look down here. Let's say write a congruent statement for any figures that you can prove to be congruent. Explain your reasoning. So if I'm looking at this letter A, I'm going to get my colors out and say, okay, C and H both have one angle marking, so they're congruent to each other. D and I both have one marking, so they're congruent to each other. E has 3. J has 3 arcs, so those are congruent to each other. And then F has 4, and K has 4. So we can say that these are congruent. Also, DC and HI, they both have one tick mark on that segment, so those two segments are congruent. DE and IJ both have 2 marks on them, 2 tick marks, so that means those two segments are congruent. We have EF and JK both have 3 tick marks on them, on that segment. And then CF and HK both have 4 tick marks on them. That means they're congruent to each other. Remember, the different number of tick marks separates what those segments or angles are congruent to. Yes, DC and HI are congruent to each other because they both have one tick mark, but DE has two markings on it, so that means that is not congruent to DC. DE is only congruent to IJ because they have the same number of markings on that segment. Same thing with the angles. Angles C and H both have one arc marking, so that means those are the only two angles that are congruent to each other. All right, so now we can write a congruent statement. So we're going to write, let's go in the same order. Start with red. So C, D, E, F. Is congruent. Oh, and this isn't a triangle. It's a quadrilateral. It's four sides. So you can either write the word quadrilateral or put a quadrilateral symbol in front of it. And we got to go in the same order. So red first, then green. Oh, whoops, I don't want to copy that. I want to use it just the same color. So H, I, J, J, K. Now you could go in a different order as long as your red one was in the same spot on the left side and the right side of that equal sign. Like if you put C at the end, then H would also have to be at the end of the other one. Now in B, okay, we have angle R and angle X are congruent, and RV and XZ are congruent, and RT and XY are congruent, but that's all we know right now. We don't know for certain that angle T is congruent to angle Y. There's no markings in that diagram. So we're going to say not congruent based on the information that we have. All right, let's go look at this one. And this type of diagram is a little bit confusing to look at because the diagonal line there, it's shared in both triangles. So some of my two of my letters are going to have two colors underneath them. So K and M both have 3 marks on them. But now when I look at angle N in this top triangle, and I'm going to, oops. So there's my top triangle. And then here's, I'm going to outline the bottom triangle. So you see in the top triangle, the orange one, angle N has 1 marking, but in the blue triangle, the bottom one, angle L has 1 marking. So that's why that this type of drawing is a little bit confusing, because I'm going to have 2 colors for those 2 points, N and L. Okay, then additionally, angle N in the bottom triangle has 2 marks, so that's actually purple. So what you can do is write another N and underline it purple. And then in the top triangle, my orange triangle, angle L has the 2 markings there. So using this, we can write our congruent statement. So triangle K, I'm going to look at the top one first. I'm going to go K, N, L. So K, N, L is congruent to triangle M. So I went to the pink one and the top one next. The angle N had 1 marking, so I got to go to L in the bottom one because it only has one marking. That angle only has one mark there. So that is one of the congruent statements that you could have. And there are 5 other that you could have written as well. And then down here, what we're going to do is we're going to find the value of x given our situation here. So again, let's get out our colors, and F and S go together. F and S, G and T are corresponding parts. H and U, and then J and V. So then we can see which parts line up with each other. So if we're trying to find x, well, G has 2x minus 7, and angle T is also blue. So those are the ones that are equal to each other. So then we can add 7 to both sides. 2x equals 110. And when I divide both sides by 2, I get x equals 55. And then you could plug that back into G because it says find the measure of angle G. But if we know that angle G and T are congruent, you don't need to plug that back in because we know that the measure of angle G has to be the same as the measure of angle T, which is 103 degrees. So again, you're using the location to see which parts are congruent to each other. G was second and T was second, so that's why those are congruent to each other. So we're going to do more of that on this page. So what I want you to do is to pause the video, try these on your own, and then when you're done, unpause it and see if we get the same answer. Okay, let's look at number 6. Again, I color-coded things, and I got that angle D was also 65 degrees, like angle A was. And remember, the box is 90 degrees, so I know that all 3 angles in a triangle have to add up to 180. So I did 180 minus 90 minus 65 to give me 25. Down here, we had 2 separate equations to figure out for x and y. Again, I color-coded things, and that box means 90 degrees. So I knew that angle x and angle P were congruent. So my first equation was 56 equals 3x minus 7. I solved that, I got x equals 21. Then for the other angle, then for y, I used the right triangle instead, 90 plus 56, because I know angle P and x are congruent, plus 2y equals 180, and then I went through and I solved that, and I got y equals 17. And then the one on the right, I first had to find x first because I have one equation, or one angle that has x and y in it. So I looked at that top triangle. Angle T was congruent in both triangles. It had the same number of markings. So in the top triangle, I did 3x minus 5 plus 120 plus 20 equals 180, because all angles in a triangle add up to 180. And this was a triangle I was looking at. So I solved that and I got x equals 15. Then I looked and said, well, angle R and angle V are congruent. So I set up an equation, 120 equals 2x plus y, plugged in 15 for x, and that then gave me 90 for y. So I hope that this was a good introduction. Again, color coding things will make things so much easier at first, and then after a while you won't need to color code them anymore to match things up. So thank you for watching the video. Make sure you smash the like button and subscribe.